Hi guys, Gary here with Gary Clayton Photography. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Now today, what I'd like to talk about today is something we actually spoke about, almost a year ago, and that was the equipment I use for underwater photography. There's been a few minor changes since then. We are getting ready in a couple of days to head south down to the Caribbean to do 8 or 9 days of underwater photography. So with that in mind, I thought, you know what, before we went on that particular expedition, I put together a little bit of a video just to recap, if you will, or review the gear I'm using for underwater photography and some of the changes that may have happened over the last year in the gear. Now, something I'd like to mention right off the get-go. Underwater photography is where photography started for me. Back in the day, probably 10, 15 years ago, underwater photography was what really got me into photography. Today, I shoot weddings, portraits, real estate, landscape, aerial, event, product, just about everything to do with cameras and photography on a commercial basis. But underwater photography is still a passion of mine. I still do very well at it, and I have many images that get sold in galleries, underwater shots of shipwrecks, marine life, coral reefs, and so on. So I thoroughly enjoy underwater photography, and as I say, next week we are going on an expedition. We're going to the north coast of Cuba, so we're flying from Toronto into Varadero, Cuba, and there we're going to be spending, as I say, about a week or so, and every day it's pretty much diving and underwater photography. So that's what we're doing. So okay, let's get right into the gear I'm using, and we'll go from there. So first of all, the first cameras actually, or some of the first cameras in a digital format, that I purchased was actually a pair of Sonys. Now both of these particular cameras, as I say, are Sonys. One's an 8.1 megapixel, one's a 10.1 megapixel camera. They're both compact, but they do have good underwater modes. Now these are both essentially entry-level type underwater cameras. They both fit into the CNC housing. Now this particular housing was made by CNC for Sony to actually fit 3 different cameras. So this casing, or this housing, will fit the, let me see, it's the WC 150, WC 170, and the WC, I think it's 300. And again, back in the day, these were great little cameras. And I've used these all the time. I use them as backups today. And they're great little machines, perfect little cameras. They do take some nice little shots. And you know what? I am going to show you, actually, right now, a couple of shots that was actually taken with this particular camera in this particular housing. So here, take a look at these. So there you go. You get an idea of what these cameras are capable of. You do have to be close with this particular camera, close to your subject. It's not a DSLR by any means. It has no manual mode. It will not write RAW files, only JPEG. So it's very limited. Both of them are very limited to what they'll actually do. But as you've just seen from the images, they are quite capable of capturing some interesting images that you can have a lot of fun with. So that's those 2 little guys. And yeah, and I still use them today on my trip next week. That system will go with me as a backup system. The main camera system that I use now is a DSLR system, and that's this guy right here. Now, first of all, this particular system right here is a Canon 550D situated in a Mekong housing. Now, this housing is essentially an entry-level underwater housing. It's good to about 130 feet or thereabouts, I think 160 actually. It was built for Polaroid by Mekong, which is actually a Chinese company, but you know what? I've got probably 300 dives on this particular housing now, and I've never had a moment's trouble with the housing itself. There's been no sign of leakage or anything like that, so it's actually been a good housing for me. It sits on a shark fin camera tray. 2 handles, each handle supports tools, if you will, or utilities. Right here, I have a pair of Archon A6 video lights. Now, I'm actually going to do a review on these shortly because I've been very happy with these two video lights. I've had them for about 3 to 4 years. I bought one 6 months later. I bought the other one because I was so impressed by the job they did and how little they actually cost. So we are going to be doing a review on those shortly. So if you are interested in underwater video lights, stay tuned for that. Here, I use a this is a strobe. Now, this particular strobe right here is a UDS 1 strobe. It's Ultramax. Not particularly an expensive strobe by any means, and you probably know you can spend $1,000 or more just on one strobe. This particular strobe retails for around the 250 Canadian dollar mark in the United States. I bet you can buy them for $150 new in the United States. They do have 4 power settings, and they're actually very, very good strobe lights for the money. The biggest issue with these is their recycle time. So when you fire this at full power and the strobe fires, it could be 5 seconds before it actually recharges back to full power. Now, if you're using it on a quarter power, it might only take a second. If you're using it on half power, it might take 2 or 3 seconds. If you're using it on 3/4 power, it might take 3 or 4 seconds. And as I say, on full power, about 5 seconds to recharge. So they're not the fastest strobe in the world by any means. But when you keep that in mind, as far as your underwater photography is concerned, you do get to use, or you do learn to use them as strobes. And I actually have a pair, so sometimes I do mount 2 strobes rather than the video lights. I'll mount a pair of strobes, again, depending what I'm doing. Now, I do have an attachment for this particular housing. The attachment for this housing is actually a what we call a wet lens system, and it is, I'll just move those out of the way. It's a wet lens system that attaches by this diopter to the outside of the dome port. Now, when you're using this particular lens, here you have a wide angle. This changes the angle or view of field immensely from a relatively narrow field of view to really quite a wide field of view. You can elect to have it on or not. You can move it over to one side and just take your regular image, or you can go with a wide angle view. So you can go with a wide angle, or you can go with a longer, your choice. It's actually quite a good tool, and again, it's a wet lens system. I purchased this as an addition to this housing, but it is built for this housing. And it works fine. Not the very, very best wide angle lens by any means, but again, for an entry level package, it's not too bad. You've got to keep in mind too what you might spend on a set like or underwater photography gear. Like an underwater photography housing, or a underwater camera housing, sorry, could cost you 2, 3, 4, 5,000 Canadian dollars or more. Depending on the housing you buy, the manufacturer, what kind of camera it's for, and so on. This particular housing right here, I only paid about 400 Canadian dollars for this housing. So, as you can see, it's not bad. And the years of service it's given me has been great. And would I buy it again? Yes, I would, although I hope I don't have to. This wet lens system for that housing was about 200 Canadian dollars. As I've mentioned, these strobes right here, and again I have a pair, are about 200 Canadian dollars. The Archon A6 lights, they're about 100 Canadian dollars a piece. So it's not too expensive. With the camera, which I actually bought, the 550D as a used camera, which came with a 18 to 55mm kit lens, which is, by the way, the only lens that will fit into this housing. You can use a 50mm prime, but that's the only lens you can use in the housing itself, is your kit lens 18 to 55mm. And again, this housing is specifically built for the 550D. There isn't another camera or DSLR camera that I can put in there. For the strobes, I do have snoots. These snoots I just made, and they actually work fine. They do a good job. It helps you control light a little bit. So again, you can have a lot of fun with this stuff. So yeah, now for my video stuff, what I use is also for underwater video, and this camera is quite capable of some very good underwater video, but I use a GoPro Hero 3 plus black edition for my underwater video, which actually sits in its mount, which goes right here. And I use that for all my underwater video, and it does a good job. I'm very happy with that. And today you can go out and buy those used for a relatively small amount of money, you know, a couple of hundred Canadian dollars. So you don't have to spend a ton of money. So yeah, so there you go. I'm just going to finish off this short video with some of the images that I have taken in the past over the last year or 2 years or so on. And as I say, next week we're going down to Cuba to dive the north coast and photograph off the north coast of Cuba. So I will be posting, of course, some videos on that, and you'll get to see the current pictures that we're shooting there. So right now I'm going to pop up a few freshwater shots right here in Ontario around the Great Lakes, and a few from the Caribbean from previous trips. Sorry. I hope you enjoy those, and hey, thank you for watching. If you like what we're talking about, please comment, please share, give me a thumbs up, tell your friends, subscribe. Talk to you later. Have a great day. Enjoy the images. Bye bye.